Sir, I need to see your ID. Now.
I'm from Texas. What's your legal reason to stop me?
Step out of the vehicle.
Don't move. Hands where I can see them. The command cracked across the gas station lot, so hard it seemed to freeze the air. A black man in a Navy uniform stood between pump 3 and the open door of his truck, one hand still wrapped around a bottle of water, the other halfway to his wallet. Blue lights strobed across the chrome trim of the pumps and flashed over the ribbons on his chest. Officer Daniel Mercer came in fast, one hand on his weapon, the other already reaching for cuffs, his voice loud enough to pull every head in the lot toward him. Get on your knees now. You fit the description. For half a second, Petty Officer Aaron Cole didn't move because he honestly believed the officer had to be talking to someone else. 10 minutes earlier, his world had been painfully ordinary. He had left the naval base outside Norfolk after a 12-hour training rotation, still in uniform because he was headed straight to his mother's apartment with a birthday cake balanced in a cooler on the passenger seat. He had stopped for gas because the tank was low and because she had texted him to pick up ginger ale on the way. It was the kind of errand that makes a hard life feel normal. Fuel, soda, cake, a late dinner with family. Then the patrol car screamed into the station like it was entering an active crime scene. Aaron set the bottle down slowly and raised both hands. Officer, I'm just getting gas. Mercer closed the distance without listening. On your knees. Aaron lowered himself onto the wet concrete, trouser legs soaking instantly in a shallow sheen of spilled rainwater and gasoline. The smell rose sharp and chemical around him. The station clerk had stepped out from behind the bulletproof window. A delivery driver stood frozen beside the ice machine. A mother pumping gas across the lane pulled her son behind her leg and started recording without a word. Mercer grabbed Aaron's shoulder, forced him forward, and yanked both hands behind his back with a violence that turned heads even before the cuffs clicked shut. What's the charge? Aaron asked, keeping his voice level. You can answer questions after I secure the scene. There is no scene. Mercer leaned close enough for Aaron to smell stale coffee on his breath. You don't tell me what this is. The accusation changed shape with every sentence. First, Mercer said there had been an armed robbery nearby. Then he said someone had reported a suspicious person in military clothing trying car doors. Then, when the clerk nervously pointed out that Aaron had already paid for his gas and drink, Mercer pivoted again and demanded identification. Proof of military service, proof the truck was his, proof the uniform was his to wear. There was something almost hungry in the officer's tone, as if he had committed himself to the arrest before he had found a reason for it, and now needed reality to catch up. Aaron kept his breathing slow. Years of selection, deployments, and operations in places most Americans would never hear about had trained calm into his bones. But calm is not the same as safety. Mercer's knee dug into the middle of his back while he searched him. The bottle of ginger ale rolled under the truck. The cake in the cooler tipped over. Aaron turned his head enough to keep his mouth from pressing into an oil stain on the concrete. My ID is in my wallet. Left pocket. Mercer pulled it free, glanced at it, then laughed. So now we're doing this, he said. He held the military ID between two fingers like he had found something fake. Navy SEAL, huh? Aaron said nothing. Mercer raised his voice for the people recording. You expect me to believe that? You think a uniform lets you do whatever you want? The line landed exactly the way Mercer wanted. A few people exchanged uncertain looks. Suspicion began spreading through the crowd, not because they had seen Aaron do anything wrong, but because authority had named him a liar. That is how power works when it decides a target first and assembles facts later. Mercer ordered Aaron to stand, then shoved him hard against the hood of the patrol car. Metal hit bone. Aaron's jaw clenched. One of the women filming gasped when the officer emptied Aaron's pockets onto the hood. Wallet, keys, a folded receipt, a challenge coin, and a small velvet box holding his mother's birthday necklace. Careful with that, Aaron said. Mercer opened the box, looked at the necklace, and dropped it carelessly on the hood. Careful, Mercer said. You're in no position to give instructions. By then, 2 more officers had arrived, not because there was evidence of a threat, but because Mercer had escalated the radio traffic with words like non-compliant and possible impersonation. The other officers did what officers often do at scenes like that. They read Mercer's confidence as proof. One started talking to witnesses. The other stood near Aaron's truck and peered through the windows like he expected rifles or stolen cash to materialize. Mercer kept working the same theme. Stolen valor. False ID. Suspicious behavior near vehicles. He said it enough times that it started sounding official. Aaron finally looked straight at him. Run the ID. Mercer smiled without warmth. I will. But he didn't. Not right away. First, he told Aaron to spread his feet wider. Then he said Aaron had tensed up during the search. Then he claimed Aaron had reached for his waistband, something every camera angle in the lot would later disprove. When Aaron repeated, run the ID, Mercer answered by shoving him again, harder this time, and pressing his forearm against Aaron's neck. The crowd changed in that instant. Uncertainty gave way to anger. Whatever anyone thought at first, they could now see a man in uniform being treated like an animal for asking a lawful question. Officer, he's not resisting, the station clerk said. Mercer snapped around. Get back inside. A man near the diesel pump spoke up next. We all saw it. He didn't do anything. Mercer pointed at the phones in the air. You interfere, you'll be detained too. That threat should have quieted them. Instead, it multiplied the cameras. A teenager on a bike rolled up, saw the scene, and immediately started streaming it live. A woman in scrubs got Aaron's mother's necklace off the hood before it slid to the ground and held it in both hands like evidence. Someone read Aaron's name out loud from the military ID Mercer had dropped on the cruiser roof. Someone else Googled it. Mercer still hadn't realized the scene had turned against him because abusive authority usually assumes public fear will last longer than it does. Then he crossed the line that ended his career and eventually his freedom. Mercer decided cuffs were not enough. He told Aaron he was being detained for officer safety, then reached up and ripped the warfare insignia from his uniform blouse. The trident hit the pavement with a tiny metallic sound that somehow cut through the whole lot. It was a small gesture compared to the force already used, but it was the most revealing. It wasn't policing anymore. It was humiliation. Punishment. A public declaration that Mercer believed he could strip another man of dignity in front of strangers, and no one could stop him. Aaron's voice dropped lower, colder. You just made a very expensive mistake. Mercer leaned in. The only mistake here is yours. What Mercer did not know, what none of the officers knew yet, was that Aaron Cole was not just some enlisted sailor in dress uniform. He was a decorated senior chief assigned to Naval Special Warfare with multiple combat citations, a man whose service record had earned quiet respect in rooms that never made the news. More important, for the last 6 months, he had also been serving on a Defense Department advisory panel reviewing misconduct complaints involving local law enforcement interactions with active duty personnel around major military corridors. He was not a politician. He was not a celebrity. He was something worse for a man like Mercer. Credible, disciplined, impossible to dismiss, and connected to people who documented everything. The reveal didn't come from Aaron. It came from Mercer's own dispatcher. The radio on the officer's shoulder crackled once, then again, louder this time because half the lot had gone still. Unit 12, verify status. Subject ID returns valid. Repeat, valid Department of Defense credential. Subject is active duty Naval Special Warfare. Command contact requesting immediate update. Mercer didn't answer. The dispatcher came back, voice tighter now. Unit 12, Pentagon liaison line is holding. They need to know why service member was detained at gunpoint. For the first time, Mercer's face changed. Not to remorse. Men like him rarely arrive there first. It changed to calculation. He looked at the crowd, the phones, the other officers, the trident on the pavement. He looked at Aaron as if he had only just seen him clearly. Then he did what compromised officers do when truth hits too late. He tried to rewrite the past in real time. Take the cuffs off, one of the newer officers muttered. Mercer ignored him and said, loudly for the cameras, Sir, if you had simply complied and identified yourself. Aaron turned his head as far as the cuffs allowed. I did. The sentence landed harder than any shout could have. Every witness had heard him say it. Every phone had captured it. A black SUV entered the lot 7 minutes later. Not local police. Not military police either. 2 civilian defense officials stepped out with base command behind them, faces flat with the kind of restrained anger that means consequences are already moving. Mercer attempted one more performance, gesturing toward Aaron, beginning a sentence about an ongoing investigation. He never got to finish it. One of the officials bent, picked the trident up from the oil-streaked pavement, and looked at the torn threads on Aaron's blouse. The expression on his face didn't change, but the station lot went quieter than before. "Uncuff him," he said. Nobody moved. He said it again. "Now." Aaron stood slowly once the cuffs came off, rubbing circulation back into his wrists. Red marks had already risen around the bones. His cheek was scraped where Mercer had forced him against the car. The woman in scrubs stepped forward and handed him the velvet box without saying a word. Aaron thanked her. He straightened what remained of his uniform with calm hands while Mercer kept trying to talk his way toward a smaller version of what everyone had just watched happen. The defense official cut him off mid-sentence. "Save it for the investigators." If the story had ended there, it would have been another local outrage with a viral clip and temporary fury. But the video that surfaced that night did something different. It didn't just show one officer being aggressive. It showed sequence, contradiction, and intent. The first angle captured Mercer arriving before any description had been confirmed. Another showed Aaron clearly offering identification before force was used. A third preserved the moment Mercer changed the alleged basis for the stop multiple times in under 4 minutes. The livestream caught the trident being ripped off. The station's own security footage, recovered before anyone could tamper with it, showed there had been no furtive movement, no attempted flight, no reach for a weapon, no threat at all. By morning, the footage was everywhere. Veterans groups amplified it first, then civil rights attorneys, then national outlets. The image that traveled furthest was not the takedown itself. It was Aaron Cole standing in a partially torn Navy uniform beside a patrol car, wrists marked, face composed, while an officer avoided looking at the insignia on the ground. That image destroyed Mercer's preferred defense before he even gave it. This was not a split-second decision under pressure. It was a chain of choices made in public. The department tried the usual language for the first 6 hours. Active review. Full context. Administrative leave. But then body camera footage came back, and with it, collapse. Mercer had muted his mic briefly during the stop, a policy violation on its own. He had also called in a suspicious person report 3 minutes before arriving. Even though dispatch logs showed the robbery suspect he claimed to be pursuing had been described as a white male in a gray hoodie headed on foot 2 blocks away. More damaging still, internal messages recovered from the mobile terminal in his cruiser showed he had recognized the truck from prior complaints Aaron had filed months earlier on behalf of young enlisted personnel who said Mercer routinely stopped black service members near the highway exits leading off base. That was the hidden structure under the whole encounter. Aaron had never told Mercer who he was beyond what the ID revealed because he shouldn't have needed to. But Mercer knew the vehicle. He knew the area. He knew exactly which men were easiest to corner at the seam between military discipline and civilian police power. Aaron had been helping document a pattern quietly, legally, methodically. On that wet night at the gas station, Mercer had not stumbled into an innocent mistake. He had targeted someone he believed he could dominate before the cameras changed the math. The investigation widened fast. Once federal civil rights investigators got involved, old complaints that had died in files started breathing again. Traffic stops without citations. Searches without probable cause. Body cam failures clustered around the same neighborhoods. Young sailors and Marines who had kept silent for fear of retaliation suddenly had a case with a face, and that face belonged to a man impossible to smear as unstable, criminal, or confused. Witnesses lined up. Former dispatchers talked. One retired sergeant disclosed that Mercer had been warned twice about pretextual stops around military housing corridors and that supervisors buried the discipline because arrest numbers made the department look proactive. Aaron did not go on television right away. That made his eventual statement hit harder. 4 days after the arrest, standing at a podium with his mother in the front row and former teammates behind him, he spoke in the same controlled tone he had used on the pavement. He said the issue was not that a Navy SEAL had been humiliated. The issue was that the same conduct had almost certainly happened to people without cameras, connections, or uniforms the officer respected. He held up the torn blouse. Then he set it down and said, "If this is what happened when the whole world was watching, imagine what happened when no one was." That sentence detonated the institutional phase. The city manager announced an external audit. The police chief, who had first defended Mercer as aggressive but committed, resigned 2 weeks later after emails showed he was briefed on prior complaints and chose not to escalate them. The county prosecutor referred the case to federal authorities after local conflict of interest questions made state charges politically radioactive. Mercer was fired before the month ended, but termination was only the first door closing behind him. A grand jury reviewed the false report, the unlawful detention, the assault, and the evidence of intentional civil rights deprivation. When the indictment came down, it was longer than anyone expected. Mercer was charged federally with deprivation of rights under color of law, falsifying official records, and obstruction related to the attempted reclassification of the stop after the Pentagon inquiry began. 2 supervisors were charged separately for destroying complaint summaries tied to earlier misconduct. The station clerk testified. The woman in scrubs testified. The teenager who streamed the stop testified and produced the original upload metadata after defense counsel tried to suggest selective editing. Dispatch recordings were played in court. Bodycam gaps were mapped second by second. Mercer's own words, spoken with full confidence at the scene, came back around him like iron doors. His defense tried one last refuge: confusion, high-stress environment, officer safety, incomplete information. But prosecutors did not have to prove Mercer hated Aaron personally. They only had to show he knowingly used the authority of the state to unlawfully seize, assault, and humiliate a man he had no legal basis to treat as dangerous. The jury saw the footage of Aaron calmly offering ID. They heard dispatch confirm a valid credential while Mercer kept him pinned. They saw the trident torn from the uniform. And they learned that after the stop, Mercer drafted a report claiming Aaron refused commands that the video showed he had obeyed from the first second. The verdict came back on a Thursday afternoon after less than 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty on the federal civil rights count. Guilty on falsifying records. Guilty on obstruction. Mercer stared forward as if he could outlast the words by refusing to react to them. He could not. Sentencing came 3 months later. Prison time, supervised release, loss of certification for life. The judge said the badge was not a weapon to be used against the innocent and described Mercer's conduct as a deliberate abuse of state power carried out in public, then concealed by lies. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited for the family, not for him. The fallout did not stop with one man. The department entered a federally monitored reform agreement. Mandatory bodycam activation rules were rewritten. Civilian review authority expanded. Traffic stop data near military corridors became public record. Officers were retrained under outside supervision, and several dormant complaints were reopened, leading to additional disciplinary actions. Money followed accountability. 2. Aaron filed a civil suit, and the settlement that came a year later funded a legal defense initiative for service members and civilians challenging unlawful stops in the region. The gas station where it began installed a plaque by the entrance, small and understated, marking the place where witnesses refused to look away. Aaron kept serving. He did not become a pundit. He did not turn himself into a brand. The torn uniform was eventually placed in a shadow box, not as a tribute to victimhood, but as evidence that rank, medals, and discipline do not shield a man when power decides his skin is cause enough. What protected him in the end was exposure. Cameras, records, witnesses, truth arriving faster than the lie could harden. Officer Daniel Mercer had rolled into that gas station convinced he could define reality by force. He thought a spotlight belonged to him. He thought a black man on his knees would be another forgettable scene folded into paperwork before midnight. Instead, the whole country watched him cross the line, watched the hidden truth surface after he had already gone too far, and watched the machinery of accountability lock into place one piece at a time until there was nowhere left to run. That is what made the ending final. Aaron got up. Mercer went to prison. The department was forced to change. And the power that had once counted on silence was dragged into daylight, where it could no longer survive. If you believe authority should answer to the truth, comment below and subscribe.